how masks have been used. Masks and torture have been used throughout history. I was reminded of a story, and of course, maybe more importantly, the photographs that accompanied the story from The Guardian, May 4th, 2013. Open letter from former Guantanamo prisoners. Former inmates of the notorious prison say Obama must make good on his claim to want it closed. Spoiler, of course, it doesn't. But you look at these photos again, and it's been a long time since we've looked at the Gitmo kind of war of terror photos. But look at these photos again and see the so-called terrorists. They're all wearing face masks, man. They've got them all wearing face masks. Oh, why aren't the guards wearing face masks? Wouldn't they want to protect themselves from those dirty, dirty viral terrorists? No, not if it's not about safety and it is about control. So going back to 2013, 14 years of injustice, Guantanamo Bay from Amnesty International. And going along right with that, even further back in time, fighting terrorism with torture from 2003, a study from the National Institutes of Health, which talks about some of the torture techniques. There was one kind of pull quote that jumped out at me. This involved ventilation by nasal mask, with the ventilator turned off to provide transient suffocation. This essentially ties in with what is basically waterboarding. And again, look at these photos. All the dudes have masks on. None of the army men have masks on. You'd think if this were a real thing, if they were worried about some transmission, that they would have masks on. So what really then kind of brings it all together for me, James, and I was only just going over this the last couple of months on the Morning Monarchy show, is it when you're in the eye of the storm, I suppose it's sometimes hard to maybe discern exactly what's going on. Scamdemic lockdowns are just the latest use of time-tested psychological warfare techniques from the Cold War to the War of Terror. I got turned on to something a few months ago called the Bitterman Report of 1956. And that would be Dr. Alfred Bitterman, medical doctor, presented his report to the New York Academy of Medicine November 13th, 1956. And it was all about the techniques used by the communists, the Chi-Coms, the Koreans to brainwash and torture captured American servicemen and make them psychological and physical prisoners. So he essentially put together this chart of coercion. And we can run down the chart very quickly. And of course, everything, as always, that we mentioned, always included in your show notes. Communist coercive methods for eliciting individual compliance. And they list things like isolation, monopolization of perception, induced debility and exhaustion, threats, occasional indulgences, demonstrate omnipotence, degradation, and enforcing trivial demands. So this is something essentially, again, researchers looked at in the 50s and said, oh, this is what the commies are doing. Then Amnesty International 20 years ago said, this is what the War of Terror is doing. And now we look at this research and it's exactly the same thing again. The chart of coercion pretty much looks exactly like what's been going on with the masks, James. And again, as the powers that shouldn't be, whether it's marketing or products or widgets or anything, it needs a good sort of symbol. And I think the mask is the most weaponized symbol of 2020, period. James.
Yeah, excellent.